I don't have any plans to go vegan, but I am gonna finally make the video soon on my low
Yeah, I
saturated
want to know
fat
about that.
experiment because you know what, I did 2 tests and I did 3 tests and now I've done 5 just because I was so curious.
Okay.
And so basically, I'll save the results for the video, but I'll just tell you what the experiment was. It was 2 months at like so when I say no saturated fat, I mean less than 15 grams a day. Sometimes it was even less than 10 grams a day. So
Yeah, which is
basically,
reasonable. Usually
yeah,
12, 15 is, yeah.
yeah. So 2 months of no saturated fat, got tested. Had a huge cheat, hosted a UFC party, like pizza, wings, all that. Got tested 2 weeks later. Again, no saturated fat other than that one big cheat. Then I did 2 months of once a week saturated fat meal, just kind of a cheat, whatever I want, but the rest of it super low. Did basically that same thing 2, 3 months later, once a week, got tested. And then I told you I just went on this vacation, 6 days, 4,000 calories, admittedly just ate trash for that 6 days.
Sure.
One day later, I was actually not even planned to do blood work. I didn't have an appointment. I just walked in. I was like, I'm just curious. So we'll see. That's the only one I haven't gotten back yet. That was just yesterday. I'm interested to see how quickly it could go up, from like just 1 week of just trash. And so we'll see. But the little bit of a spoiler is that there was a very significant drop from the change in diet.
Wow.
I still eat meat, but I eat like 99% lean ground turkey.
Yeah.
And then I'll just add like olive oil or something like that. We talked about cheese last time, right? And you gave me some
Yeah.
recommendation. I've been buying fat-free cheese. Definitely not the same, but if you have that with the turkey and you add some olive oil and stuff and avocado, like you get to a similar fat amount, but basically almost no saturated fat. And I
Exactly.
enjoy it. And again, because I'm leaner, what I say, hunger is the best sauce, right? So like
Yeah.
to me, it's good. But I could totally see why somebody would not
No,
necessarily like it.
no. If I was an omnivore, I'd be doing exactly like you.
Yeah.
That's the best way to go about it. You know, low fat milk, skim,
Yep.
probably egg
Yeah.
whites as well.
Yep.
Turkey, lean chicken. Just avoid all the fatty cuts,
Yep. And I'll just
and
have
you'll be
like
fine.
fat-free Greek yogurt,
It's such a simple thing to
stuff like
do,
that.
and that's why I don't get why guys are so like reluctant in hearing that. Like, especially if it comes from me. Like, I'm not telling people they have to go 100% plant based, but fuck, like, just drop your saturated fat. It's such an easy thing you could do.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's when it gets tough with the people because you were saying earlier about, you feel good, you're doing the right things. And then you have the people on the opposite end who are doing carnivore. And it's very easy to call them morons and everything. And I personally would not recommend carnivore. But, you get people who are like, hey, I started eating carnivore. I lost a ton of weight, which of course they're going to lose weight because they're really limiting the number of
Sure.
foods they eat. They feel great. Again, could that be because they're eating less food total and they're in a calorie deficit? For sure, but ultimately they're not eating processed foods. It's tough because these people are like, hey, I feel better than I ever have. It's like, well, that's important, but also maybe your LDL is now like 300. That's
Well, the thing
probably more
is,
important.
I would say like almost all of them have really high LDL. And the problem
Exactly.
is they say they feel good, but they're in denial that high LDL is an independent risk factor for heart disease.
Right.
So it's like pick your poison, right? It's on you, bro. But like the difference is the people who do plant based, not only do they feel good, but the numbers add up with what the evidence suggests is optimal.
Yeah.
So it's like the same, you know? And then they're also in denial of their blood pressure for some reason. Or they'll have an extreme recommendation of say having 10 grams of sodium a day. I've heard
Yes.
guys like
Stuff
Stan
like
Efford
that.
say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these
I've seen
guys
studies about
are, yo, these guys are red like a tomato.
that.
They have LDL through the roof, and they're like, "Oh, I feel good," and then all they have to show is their big numbers in the gym.
Yeah.
But every other nutritional expert in the world disagrees with their position. So it's like that's why I can't take that group seriously.
Yeah. It is hard for me to take them seriously. I will say, like, if you said, hey, you have to do one or the other, you have to be vegan or you have to be carnivore, I 1,000% would go vegan. I mean, it's really not that close in my mind.
Sure.
I think the evidence is strongly in favor of that over carnivore. I do think actually examine.com had a good post on meat recently. My personal belief is that there's not very good quality evidence that meat is an issue independently. Now, if we're talking about processed meats and everything, obviously that's different. You would
That
probably
yeah.
disagree and think that like maybe red meat. I've just not been convinced by the evidence that like including meat in your diet is a problem. But again, I do think lower saturated fat is important. So you have to decide what meat you're going to have. I do think higher fiber and higher vegetable intake and fruit intake is consistently shown to be beneficial. We have basically no long-term data on carnivore diets, so I just could
True.
never really get on board with it. And I do believe, as you mentioned, that LDL is and ApoB is an independent risk factor for heart disease. I
Yeah.
understand that it's one of those things like necessary but not sufficient. The people who are on carnivore, they argue, hey, but like our inflammation is so low
Yeah.
and
Inflammation. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And that's fine. I just would never feel comfortable giving that recommendation because we just don't have any long-term data on it. And again, like the LDLs, man, like I told you, my LDL was like in the 300s when I did
Yeah.
carnivore for 1 month. It wasn't like I was on it for years. So it's just, oof, I don't know. It's great that they feel better. And if it was the only diet, like if you said, hey, they're going to eat a healthy omnivorous diet and be 300
Mhm.
pounds overweight, or they're going to be perfectly like 160 pounds and everything, but carnivore, sure, it's probably worse to be like obese and everything. But
Sure.
otherwise, I don't know, man. I try to introduce some fruits and vegetables and stuff.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair take, man. You're not going to get any disagreements from me. I guess my only thing I would say with the meat, like for example, it depends like what kind of like what health markers would be impacted in a negative way. Like for example, let's say you were plant based, but you consumed skim milk and egg whites. Are you going to get heart disease doing that? My answer as a vegan is no, you won't. It's not going to happen. That's not what's going to kill you.
Mhm.
So I can be honest about that, right? But then if I say, okay, if you're going to choose like red meat or just like a fatty cow versus deer meat, is there going to be a difference? Yeah, but again, it goes back to the saturated fat, right? So like, are you more likely to end up with like, are your macros going to be more distorted if you're introducing meat into your diet versus eliminating it? And I would say if you're eating too much of it, or like it consists of a major part of your overall macronutrient balance, then it's going to be impossible to match what a more plant-based diet can offer. And that's why I would say like someone who is eating animal products, it's not that it's inherently bad, it's just that it shouldn't be the majority of what you eat. Like you should
Yeah.
still be 80% plant-based at least, you know? And that is what
Yeah,
we
I would
see with
definitely
the
agree
blue
with the
zones and
plant-based.
stuff
Yeah.
like that. So like
Do
an
you
example that
think,
I heard
go
years
ahead.
ago was like your meat should be like a part of a chicken pot pie kind of thing. Not that you're eating like a giant steak to go with your meal,
Right, right, right.
or like you're having a you're not going to have a whole pack of ground beef to yourself. You might do a 50-50 split with black beans as well, you know? So there's ways to go around that. And in general, when you have foods that are rich in antioxidants, that actually lessens some of the negative effects of the meat. You know, like if you're having berries and black beans, like that all goes a long way in synergy, you know? So I guess it's like you have to ask compared to what, and then you have to say
Yeah.
like how much of it, like when I go past a certain amount, when does it become problematic? You know, and to that, like if you're eating a reasonable amount, not what some of these bodybuilders are showing, then you probably would be fine.
Do you
But you got to be
think,
careful with it.
like one of the issues I have with the carnivore movement is they like nobody's discussing the people who did carnivore and then had problems, which
Yeah, that got heart
that's a
attacks
big
and
group,
strokes.
right? And not
Yeah,
even just heart attacks, just some people don't feel good on it. Some people have had issues with it. Um, Conversely, there are people who have said that I mean, there's a lot of examples that I've seen where people said they did vegan and they felt poorly on it and then they changed. So what do you think in those instances, what mistakes are being made, do you think?
I think they're following fad vegan diets, or they're junk food vegans, which they're not coming from a health position first standpoint. And that's not why I did this. For me, it was always health first. And then the ethics came along for the ride because it's like, why not? If I'm going to acknowledge 80-90% plant based, I might as well get rid of that final 10%, maybe get a slight boost in health and do what's right for the world and the animals. So for me, I am empathetic in that way. I've reached that point.